Good morning. I'm putting together this message to inform you of a change I am making in our Bible study. I'm speaking specifically of the book of Romans that we have just completed. So I have been thinking of where I want to go next. I have started a study in the book of First John, but there is a study I wanted to do for a long time. I thought I would try to study it and write a book on it. But with all my other projects that I have been doing, it just seems like I haven't really had the time to start a new one. And I think you could probably understand that. Today, I think I'm going to complete my manuscript on Romans, and I'll be submitting it for publication. So it's going to be in book form probably over the weekend. But I sent you a copy of an ebook I put together on it, and the thing that's unique about this is you can listen to it or read it. I think the listening probably is better because sometimes it's hard to read stuff. Your eyes get tired. And so I put both options in there. Now, sometimes I'm not going to put them into the book, but I have it into my ebook that I sent to you. So they're available. Now, the study I want to do now is in the book of Malachi. It's the last book of the Bible. And it's unique because it's one of three prophecies in the Old Testament that took place after the children of Israel left Babylon. And I'll give you some details on that as we begin the study. And I thought I would like to try something different this time. For instance, when I wrote my book on Revelation, and I taught I would use audios as well as instead of writing it. I did put it in the book, but when I presented the book online as a teaching, I use audios. I didn't use the YouTube message to do that. I just recently discovered this, so it's something new for me, and I really like it. And it gives me the opportunity to be able to preach once again. I never thought I'd be able to preach. I don't have the opportunity, but with these devices and these opportunities, like I could take advantage of some of my whatever skills I have left. And I'm 80. I'll be 87 in November. And I don't know how long the Lord is going to give me to do all these things. When I turned 85, Caleb was one of my favorite people in the Bible. And when he was 85, he came to Joshua and he said, "Give me this mountain." There were enemies that were yet unconquered and were not being conquered. So Caleb at 85 says, "We could do it." And he gave him the mountain and he did it. So when I started my book on Isaiah, I said, well, maybe I just turned 85 and maybe this is the mountain I have. Well, friends, I got good news. I'm already halfway up the mountain. I completed the first portion of Isaiah, and I'm working right now on the second volume. It's really Isaiah is a very difficult book, and it's hard to understand all of this. It's not outlined easily, but it's there if you look for it. And so I'm starting now on my second volume. My first volume I called The Prophecies of That Day, and now the second volume is going to be called The Prophecies of a Greater Day. So now that I finish my book on Romans. I'm going to probably have a little more time to work on this one on Malachi. So Malachi is a book that I always wanted to give more attention to because there's a lot of information. Let me just give you a little background to this book. It was written after Nehemiah. You remember the book of Nehemiah? He went back. He started out as the king's cupbearer, and he was allowed to leave to help build the walls of Jerusalem again. And when he finished, he went back to do his job with the king. But a lot of corrupt things started to happen in Israel after he left. So he had to come back and correct them. There were a lot of abuses that took place. And it's all found in chapter 13 of Nehemiah. And that serves as a background for the book of Malachi. You see, the people of Malachi had this, shall I say, superficial, for lack of a better term. They had just kind of settled in. They were influenced by a corrupted priesthood. And they had these ideas about worship and God, and worship wasn't a joyful experience for them. It was drudgery. Actually, the whole idea of the temple and serving God became a burden to them. So Malachi addresses the problem, and I can see an application, especially to people who go to church and they settle in and get used to the same old status quo thing, and they lose their joy and excitement. So Malachi speaks to that. So I'm all excited about studying this, doing this study. Now, in my book on Revelation, I've written 8 volumes on Revelation, different books. So I'm very familiar with that book. So I decided to do another study just on using YouTube and speaking extemporaneously without notes. So that's a whole new experience for me. Now, when I did the book of Romans, I didn't have the book beforehand. So as I taught the book of Romans, I was putting the messages on audio as I went along. So now, so what I did is I wrote the book after I taught it. Uh, in Revelation, I put the messages together after I wrote the books. Now, with Malachi, I'm going to do something a little different. I decided that I'm going to write the book and do the audio message, the video messages at the same time. So that's going to be kind of a new experience for me. I am really loving using the YouTube messages, the the method. It gives me some liberty and freedom, and I feel like I be myself. And as I work on the messages, if I don't like what I said, I can start all over again. And sometimes I do that. So I can make corrections, and I can put these nice backgrounds, which, like I'm doing. This isn't my office. I wish it was, but I've never graduated to that point yet in my life that that's possible. I have a simple room, cluttered with a lot of background stuff that probably is a little distracting. So these backgrounds are really nice. So I'm just giving you an idea where I'm going next. I started a book on First John. I was going to call it Walking in the Light. And when I started my book on Isaiah, that kind of got left off to the side. I got as far as chapter 2, and I thought about using that. But Friends, I don't know how many years the Lord has left for me to do all these things. It seemed like when I turned 85, all these new ideas came to mind, and I wish that when I was younger, all of these things were available. I probably could have done so much more. But the Lord has given me good health, bad eyesight, and that's why I have to use these why I have to speak extemporaneously, because I can't read my notes. Sometimes I have a hard time just reading the scriptures, but I'm finding ways to overcome that problem. So all of this is kind of a new experience for me. I'm finding out how to do all these things. You see, I have these disabilities. If my eyesight, if it wasn't for my failing eyesight, I probably wouldn't be motivated to do all these things. The idea is, how can I keep doing what I love doing when I don't have the eyes to see? And maybe by my doing this, I could be a blessing to somebody else who's facing the same kind of problem. I mean, the Lord doesn't give us disabilities to punish us necessarily, but sometimes when God uses our lives and He uses our disability to be a greater blessing to people, then it's more understandable why it all happens. I was talking to my son on the phone last night, and I discovered something. I asked him the question, do you know the difference between knowledge and understanding? And he says he didn't know. He thought I was talking double talk or trying to confuse him. And he's a man much smarter than myself, much more knowledgeable. But I'm finding out that God has called me not necessarily to preach or to write books, but to help people to understand the Bible. And that means before I can help other people to understand it, I have to understand what I'm teaching to other people myself first. So the lessons I share with you are born out of the things God is teaching me first. I think that's what preaching ought to be. Now, some of you may not agree with me, and you use a different method, and you're accountable to the Lord for what He's called you to do. But I know, and I'm convinced that the main reason God has called me is to help me to impart understanding rather than just information. And so through writing and through these messages, I'm able to create understanding. Now that's wonderful. I don't know anybody else that has that particular ministry. I don't know of anyone that does, but the Lord knows what He's doing, and I'm glad He's given me in my old age some ability to do something useful. And that's a lot to thank the Lord for, isn't it? Well, I said enough. I just wanted to put this together as a introduction to you about where we're going next in our study. Probably next week. I'm going to start today writing my stuff down, and next week we'll begin our study. We'll see you then.